In today's session, we'll be learning about what is JSP. JSP is nothing but Java Server Pages. It's a server-side technology. It's used for creating dynamic web content and web applications. As it is mentioned here, Java Server Pages are HTML pages that contain Java code. So inside an HTML page, you can embed Java code. That is the main concept behind Java Server Pages. And it's an advanced version of servlet technology. We have seen servlet in our last class. And Java Server Pages is an advanced version of servlet technology. It is a web-based technology that helps us to create dynamic and platform-independent web pages. And as I said before, we can insert Java code in HTML or XML pages. Internally, this Java Server page is converted into a servlet by the JSP container before processing the client's request. So why we should learn JSP? Because it's an extension of servlet technology and coding is quite easy in JSP, and it enables fast development, and we write less code than servlet in Java Server Pages. Connection to database is easier and maintenance is pretty easy, and it's portable, powerful, flexible, and easy to maintain. Okay, this is a brief overview of JSP Lifecycle. As you see in this diagram, the JSP page that you write is converted to a servlet using a JSP translator internally, and this servlet is compiled and a class file is generated, and the container creates an instance of the class that becomes the servlet object, and this container executes the servlet object, and this servlet is responsible for generating the response back to the client. So JSP internally uses a servlet, and we have the initialization method, JSP service method, and JSP destroy method, as we have seen in the servlet lifecycle earlier. So this is a very brief outlook of the JSP lifecycle. Let us go ahead and see what we are going to learn. We're going to learn three things about JSP, that is declarations, scriptlets, and expressions. What are these three kinds of scripting elements? Declarations are used for defining methods and variables. So we use tags like this to declare variables. So let's take an example here in my var. So I'm declaring some Java variable here, right? So I'm putting that inside tags like this. Even methods, classes, everything can be defined within tags like this, and these are called declarations. And when we put something in a declaration, this is not used for sending output to the client. This is mainly for defining a class, a method, or variables. We use the tags given here. We embed that in delimiters like this. Scriptlets is wherein you put the actual Java code, and we embed scriptlets, we embed Java code using tags like this, the delimiters. So I given an example here. And expressions are used for actually displaying the output of an expression back to the browser. So we use delimiters like this, percentage equal to actually print the data of an output of an expression back to the browser, and that is given here. Math.square root is a Java method, and we use this dot square root method to find the value of this, and then we print this back to the browser. So that's a very brief overview of the three kinds of scripting elements: declarations, scriptlets, and expressions. We'll understand all these things by directly coding on Eclipse. Let us start by creating a JSP project. For that, we have to go to File, New. We have to create a new dynamic web project, and let's give the project name as first JSP project. Then click on Next, Next, generate web.xml. We'll check that, and then we'll finish. So this is going to create a dynamic web project, and to this project we'll be adding our first JSP file, and then we'll be coding our JSP programs inside that file. Okay, the project is created. The next step is right click on this project and you add a new JSP file to this project. So go to new and then JSP file. Let's give the file name as login JSP. Click on next. Obviously we'll be using HTML5. Finish. So this will generate some default code for us, and let's not worry about this. It's plain simple HTML code. Let's give a title first. It's welcome to my login page. So title will be displayed on the top of your HTML page. So this is the basic structure that has been generated, and whatever we are going to write, the HTML form we are going to create, we can put that inside the body. Let's create a form, a simple HTML form. Here we'll have a label, and we'll give the label tag as select name. Say enter your name, that's your label, and we can have an input here. Input type is equal to, this input type will be actually text, and we have to give a name element property for this input name that we are going to get. That is, we'll say this is username, and we can also make this field to be required. Okay, so we'll have a break. The next thing is we'll have an submit button here. Input type is equal to, we'll say that is submit, and we'll also give name for a submit, that is submit, and value is submit. So our simple form is created. So user can enter his name and then he can submit. Now we need to capture this name and print it back to the user. For that we need to have a Java code. So let's write Java code. Say whenever you're writing Java code, you have to use these delimiters. So this is where Java is getting embedded in an HTML page. So that is the main concept behind JSP. We put Java code inside HTML. So wherever you're going to write Java code, you're going to use these delimiters. And when the user submits, we have to identify whether the user has submitted something or not. For that we can use a string. We are going to declare a string here. String submit is equal to, we'll use the request object, request dot get parameter, and then here we are going to give the name property for submit, that is submit. And if the user clicks on submit, definitely there will be some value for submit, right? So this is the value that's getting submitted. So submit will not be null. That's what we're going to check next. We'll check if submit is not equal to null, we'll process this. So what is the meaning of this? That is, we'll check whether the user has submitted. If the user has submitted, definitely there's a value for submit, so submit will not be equal to null. And we'll write back output, it's out.print ln, we'll say welcome, and what we are going to do here is we are going to print the username. So we have to get the username from the form. For that we can have a variable string username, and then we'll use the request object, request dot get parameter, and what is the name property for this username, that is username. We'll enter that here, so it's username. So whatever username entered in the form is coming to string username, and then we are printing welcome username. So this will be sent back. This is the response that's sent back to the browser, and the user will be able to see this message. So this is a very simple form that we are taking up here. Let's run this form. Let's see what's the output. So once when the user submits, there should be some action for the form, right? We have to define the action. So I'm going to give the action is the same of form name. So action is login.jsp and method is post. So once when the user submits the form, the data gets posted to the server, and on the server this code gets generated. And where is this code? This code is again on login.jsp. So HTML and JSP is in the same phase. That's why I'm just forwarding the action to login.jsp again. So this code on login.jsp will be executed, and the user will be able to see the output, and the method that we are using here is post method. So that's about our simple JSP application. Next, what we'll do is we'll go and run this. For that, we have to use login.jsp. We'll right click and then we'll run this on Tomcat server. So Tomcat server is the web container. We have already used that with servlet. Let's right click and run this. Let's check whether we are getting the output. So it's run as run on server. Yeah, we have to save. That's the server we are going to use, and finish. Restart server. Yeah, for any changes we'll restart the server too. So this is a server, and let's see whether we are getting the output here. Okay, we have the web browser, and this is the form. So let's enter Satish. Let me enter my name, and when I submit, so the Java code will be executed by the servlet, and then you see welcome Satish. So how this entirely happened is, this form when submitted, the data gets posted to the server, and where is this data? It's actually the processing code. This is the processing code. Where is this code? This is again in login.jsp. That's why the action is again diverted to login.jsp. So this particular piece of Java code is executed by the servlet on the server, and this output is sent back to the client and printed on the browser. So we have finished the very first step. We have executed our first JSP program successfully. I hope you are clear with this. Okay, now let us extend this code. So we have this simple form here. What we'll do is we'll get some more fields from the form, and we'll insert these fields into a database. So for this, I'm going to use my MySQL database. Inside my MySQL database, I've created a VIT database. Inside that, I have the student table. So we have 4 columns in this table: name, password, country, and mark. First 3 columns are strings, and the last column is an integer. So my objective is to get this data, name, password, country, and mark, using the form here. So once when the user enters the data and submits, the login.jsp, what it's going to do is it's going to submit this data to our database, and for this our JSP is going to use JDBC connectivity. So we're going to see how to use JDBC with a JSP page. That is the objective of this demonstration. Let's start extending our form. So what we are going to do here is we are going to add password, country, and mark, so that the user can enter all this data using the form. Let's go and change it. So the next thing that we are going to have is we are going to ask the user to enter the, say, password. Enter your password, and here the input type will be password. The name element, the name property will be password, and password will also be required. After this, we are going to get the country. The country we can get it using a select option in HTML, or we can say it's a drop down. First we'll have a label for this country, so that is label for is equal to, say, select country, and we can say select your country. For selecting the country, we'll use a drop down box. So select, and then we'll give the name property for this to be country, and in select we have to throw some options. We'll have the options here, that is option, and name is we'll give the name as India, and the value that's submitted to the server will be India, and this will be displayed to the user, the country, and then we have to close the option. So like that, we'll have some 3 options shown to the user. The next option will be US, value is US, and the display will be US. Let's go with the third option. Let's say it's UK, value is UK, and display to the user will be UK. So we have created this simple drop down, and we'll have a break after a drop down. The next thing that we have to display is the mark. So the user should enter the mark. For this, you'll be using a text field. So we'll say select mark and enter your mark. Input type is equal to text. That's fine. We can also have it as number, but I'm having it as text here. And the name property will be mark. It's also required. We'll make everything required. Input type is submit. Okay, so our form is ready. Let's save this. Let's go and check our form. So this is the form. Say he enters the name, he enters the password, selects the country, and enters the mark, and then submits. So this welcome Satish that we have to remove. No, we are going to remove this piece of code, but our HTML form is fine. The next thing is we have to write code here, and we have to establish a database connection. We have to do a lot of things. So we will be checking whether he has submitted. So this is going to be fine. So will be checking whether he has submitted. Once when he has submitted the form, we have to get the username, password, and country. For this we'll have a string password. Again we'll use this request object, the HTTP request object get parameter. We'll get the user password. So what we are going to enter here is the name property of password, that is password. So that we are going to type. So name element is very important. The name property for every element is very important because we are going to access the value using that name property. Likewise, we have a string country. We will have this request object dot get parameter, maybe dot get parameter, and here we are going to give country. So what is this country? It is the name property for the select the drop down, and we'll have a string called mark. Again we'll use the request object dot get parameter. Now we'll get this mark by passing the name property for mark. So that's what we are performing here. So we've received all the data submitted by the user using the request object. So that is the HTTP request that's coming in. We have extracted all the data. We have populated that to some local variables here. The next objective is we are talking about a student table and a student entity. So obviously we should define a student class and pass these parameters there. And inside the student class we'll be calling the insert method, and we'll establish a database connection and insert. Okay, let us define the student class. For that we'll be using the declaration tags here, that is percentage exclamation mark. So we are going to define some classes here, that is class student, and we'll define all the properties for the student like private string name. We'll call this username itself, and we'll have a private string password. So we are defining the properties here, private string, and let me reduce this. So it's private string country, and we'll have private int mark. So these are the data members for the student. We'll have a constructor here, that is public student. It's a parameterized constructor, so we'll have string username that's coming in and string password, and then we'll have a string country, and we'll also have an integer mark. So that's coming in, and we have to initialize this dot username is equal to whatever username we're getting in, and this dot password, this dot we can select it like this, password is equal to password, and this dot country is equal to country. So initializing all the data members here, this dot mark is equal to mark. So we have done with our constructor, and next we are going to have this method here. This is a public method, public boolean. So this will actually insert student record. So this method will insert student record and it will return true or false based on the insert that has happened. And I have maintained that to be boolean because it's going to return a boolean value. This is very similar to what we have seen with servlets and JDBC, the same kind of a concept here. If you have gone through my previous lecture, much of the concepts here will be somewhat similar, except for the fact that we are using a JSP page here. So the very first thing that we have to perform here is we need to establish a database connection, because when we are inserting a record we need a database connection, and the same process continues. We need to have this DBMS connection class, which we have used many times in our previous videos, the class called DBMS connection. So if you are following my previous videos, you'll be able to understand what I'm coding here. So this class is mainly used for establishing a database connection. I'll have a string URL and a string password for connecting to my database, and a string. This is we need a username too, right? We'll have a username. So 3 parameters for getting a connection, and we'll have this public constructor. So this object, when it's getting created, we'll have this constructor that's getting in a string URL, string username, and then we'll have the string password, and we'll initialize everything. This dot URL is equal to whatever that URL that's coming in. This dot username is equal to whatever username that's being supplied, and this dot password. So this is actually for making a connection with the database. We have used this many times. This is a very familiar thing that we have done in our previous classes. Many times we have used this. And the next method we are going to have is for returning a connection. So connection. So here we are going to use this connection class. For this, the step is we need to import. So we have to use some directives here. That is, so we have to give percentage at, and then we have to give page, and we have to say import. We are going to import in quotes java.sql.star. So this is important. We need to import these packages. For this we have to give the directive like this: at page import is equal to java.sql.star, and once when you import that, your connection classes can be used. So it's public connection, and we'll say it's get connection. So this method will be returning an object of type connection. That is the objective. And let's see, now this error has been fixed because we have imported java.sql.star. Don't forget this step. This is very important. And after this, what we'll do is we'll put everything inside try catch. We'll handle any exceptions that come in, and we'll have system.out.println. We'll do e dot and get message. My system is a little slow. Anyway, so now we'll define a connection object. Connection c1 is equal to null. And how will you establish a connection? For that we should have class dot for name, and then we have to give the driver here. We have to load the driver. What is the driver? That is nothing but com dot MySQL dot cj dot JDBC dot driver, and then dot new instance. So this dot should fetch us new instance. So it's going to load the instance of the driver. Next we will define the connection object by using driver manager dot get connection, and we have to pass the URL. So this is the URL that's defined for this class. URL, username, next, and then password. So this will establish a connection, and what we have to do is we have to return this connection. Don't forget to return this connection because the method type is return type is connection. So that's how you establish a connection for your database. And we also have another method that is public void close connection, and this one gets an object of type statement and connection object it gets, and what it does is it's going to close statement dot close and then connection dot close. So it's going to close the connections, and I think we should have this throws SQL exception. We should handle some SQL exception here, or else it will give us some errors and notification later on. So our DBMS connection class, the familiar class, has been created, and we are going to use this class, an object of this class, to establish a connection here. So again, we'll move to our student, and inside insert record we'll establish a DBMS connection. How we are going to do that is DBMS connection. We'll have connect. We'll have everything initialized to null here, and we'll have a connection object that's also initialized to null, and we'll have prepared statement, which is an object, right? Statement is an object of type prepared statement. This is also initialized to null, and then we can have try catch. Everything inside the try catch block will handle the exceptions. So we'll handle the exceptions, and we'll do system.out.println. We'll do e dot and then get message. So we are printing the message here. Now inside this we need to define what is connect. So what is connect? Connect is equal to new DBMS connection. It's an object of DBMS connection. Okay, so I have to code this connection, and we have to pass the URL here, whatever URL for our database, right? So that we have to pass, that is JDBC colon MySQL colon and then slash slash localhost, where your server is, port number for your server, and then database, and then the next thing is we have to give the username, that is root, and password. There's no password for my database. So if you have put up some password for your database, you have to give it here. So it's going to use this credentials and log into your database server. Okay, we have created an object of DBMS connection. This object is ready. Now we have to call this method to get the connection, and this method will be returning an object of type connection. So let's say connection is equal to connect dot get connection. So get connection will be returning an object of type connection, which is handled here. So what is CON? It is an object of type connection. Next thing is we should have this SQL string, that is we'll insert the data, insert into student values, and here comes the use of prepared statement. We'll have question mark comma question mark comma question mark comma question mark. For every column in the database we have a question mark, and then we'll end the SQL query in the Java statement. After that we should have this object of type prepared statement. Okay, we have already declared the object. Only thing is we have to define what is this object. Statement is equal to connection dot prepare statement, and we have to pass the SQL string here. So again, we have used prepare statement many times in our previous classes, so that should be very familiar to you. And we have to bind all that input that we have received, username, country, and mark, to our query. So how will you do that? It's a statement dot set string. So first parameter is nothing but username, and the next parameter will be also set it's dot set string. Second parameter is password, and the third parameter is set string again. Third parameter is country, that's getting to the database, and fourth parameter is set int. It's dot set int, so it's an integer value that's getting in, so that is mark. So we have mapped all the parameters to our query. The next thing is we have to call statement dot execute. So for insert we'll use execute update. So this will return the number of rows inserted. So int I is equal to statement dot execute update. So if the number of rows inserted is greater than 0, we can have a boolean flag here. Say we'll say boolean insert. We'll initialize that to false, and once when the insert is successful, we can say boolean, it's not boolean, I'm sorry, it's insert is equal to true. And else if I is equal to 0, then insert was not successful, so we'll say insert is equal to false. Okay, that's our insert. Insert is done. Our insert is done. Finally we have to return insert, because this method has a return type boolean, so we need to return insert. So what we have done in this method, we established a database connection, we wrote this SQL query for insert into the student table, we mapped all these parameters to our query, and then we executed a query. If the number of rows affected is greater than 0, then insert happened, or else insert didn't happen, and we are returning the insert. So this actually is being called from within our Java code here. Where is the Java code? So this should be called somewhere from within our Java code here. Say we have retrieved everything. Now what we'll try and do is we'll have a try and a catch here, and we'll catch all the exceptions and system dot out dot println. We'll say e dot get message, so it's exception handling here. And what we are going to do after getting all that parameter from the form, we are going to create an object of type student. S is equal to new student, and then we are going to pass the username entered by the user, password, and then country, and then mark. So all these things we are going to send this to our student class. Where is the student class? To the constructor. So we're going to pass everything to the constructor, whereas here you see mark is of type integer, and whatever mark we are receiving here is of type string. So what we'll do is we'll do integer dot parseInt. We'll convert that to an integer. Whatever mark that is coming in from the form, we are converting that to an integer, so that this integer value maps to our student constructor, because mark is an integer in our student class, and whatever input the user enters through the form is coming in as a string. So we are doing this conversion. So once when this student object is created, we have to call s dot insert student. So this will insert that student record. And what is insert student going to return? It's a boolean method. So insert student will insert the record and return a boolean value. So let's see how to handle that. Say let's have boolean result is equal to s dot insert student, and if result is true, what we can do is we can write the information to the browser, that is out dot print. We can say record inserted successfully, else we can do out dot print you must learn JSP more to avoid such errors. It means that there is some issue with our code, or somewhere we have went wrong. So that's what is this. So this checks whether the user has submitted. If the user has submitted, get all the data entered in the form. create an object of type student, and this will actually create an object of type student, initialize all the values by getting the values from the form. We'll be initializing the student object, and we are calling insert student, wherein we are establishing a database connection using the prepare statement, executing the query, and this returns true or false. So when it is true, the student record has been inserted. That's what we are handling here. Say if you come down here, what we are doing is we are handling that as a result. If the result is true, it means a student record has been inserted, and we say record inserted successfully. Else we say you must learn JSP more to avoid such errors. So this is the code we have written, and there are certain things we have to perform now. We need to add this MySQL connector.jar file to our project. Let me tell you how to add that. Right click on the project, and you go to build path, configure build path, you go to add external jars. See, this is very important. You should have this MySQL connector .jar file. In my previous lectures on JDBC, I've told you from where we have to download this jar file, and I'm using this version 8.0.21. Let me add that, apply and close. There's one more thing I do before running my code, that is on the login.jsp, I'll right click and I'll run configurations. So please perform this step so that if you get any errors with respect to class not found exception that is pertaining to the driver, that can be avoided. Let me right click and run configurations. You go to the class path, and then you see you add external jars and add your MySQL connector Java file here to jar file here. So I have already added that. You can see it's here, so I'll close it. Once when this step is ready, you can go and try executing your code. Before execution of the code, let me check, are there any errors anywhere. So what it says, undefined attribute name. Okay, name is not needed here. Maybe that is the thing. Option, we don't need a name for every option, I guess. So let's delete this name property from the options. For options, we don't need a name. That might be an error. So that error has been rectified. That's a warning, but it's fine. Are there any other issues? We'll check one more time. Okay, no more issues. Let's save our code. Right click on login.jsp, run as run on server. I hope that this should work. Finish. So we have our form up and ready. And in our database, we have only 2 records. Let's insert another record. Let's say the another record is Jeff. Password is Jeff pass. Let's say Jeff is from US and mark yes code 44. So when we submit, we should get this message, record inserted successfully. Say it's exactly displayed here, and this information should be inserted in the database. Let's check that. Let's browse and see whether that record is there, whether the record got inserted in the database. Yes, you see Jeff pass US 44. So you are successful. Somehow this code ran. No, I didn't get any errors the first time I ran it. Normally I used to get a lot of errors, but this time it was working fine. So that's how you use JDBC with JSP, and you insert a data inside the MySQL database. Some of the important steps, normally you might forget importing java.sql, or you might forget having the reference libraries, and other things remain the same. Please see to that you use the appropriate delimiters and you embed Java code inside the JSP page. I hope you have understood this. You can go ahead and try other JSP concepts like having a search page, deleting a record from the database, or updating a record from the database by getting the data from the form. So you can try all these things. Again, what we have learned is just a small drop in the ocean called JSP, and you need to spend a lot of time and effort to really create professional applications using JSP. This is just an introduction, and I hope you all have understood this. Please try this now. Thank you.